Do you want to, okay. Excuse me, legal counsel has asked me if we want to get started, in lieu of the chair being here. He's running a few minutes late, but it's up to y'all.
Let's do it.
Okay, so who would like to be the vice chair or? Okay, excellent. I will call the meeting of the Thursday, November 13th, 2025 JWB Finance Committee meeting to order. Let's see. Action items 2A, Auditor Selection Committee. That is Robbie Stivers. Robbie?
Thank you, Mr. Substitute Chair. The one action item that we have before you is for the audit RFP selection process. And I'd like to recognize Laura Hayes in the back, as well as Kelly Grossman. She's out today doing an excellent job on this memo, and I think you'll find it to be very informative as we go through it. Certainly, I'm not going to read it to you. We need to go to the Audit Selection Committee file, please. There you go. Thank you. And I'll get back up to the top here. So the nemesis of this is for today is to understand who's going to be the liaison to the committee, and that'll be me. Certainly to ask questions and so forth. We're going to talk about the timeline, and we're also going to talk about the RFP factors to evaluate it, award it, et cetera, and then the contract period. There's a long history of how we've gotten to selecting our auditor. Terry Beckert has been the auditor for JWB since 2006. There's been a series of RFPs that have gone out in the past. The last one was FY21 through FY23. And all the options now have expired on that as of the completion of the FY25 audit. And the Finance Committee by statute is the one that's been voluntold to step up and be a part of this. Certainly we'll make that as painless as possible as we go through. And there's just more information about the statute. The timeline is being proposed. Key dates here is obviously we want to get down to the award date, which is post-award notice, and the award date, the intent to award is July the 1st, so that's a real key date. The Auditor Selection Committee will be there in June, and then in May there will be an evaluational meeting. We'll go through the criteria of the RFP. And then, as I mentioned, I will be the liaison to the Finance Committee. And then the evaluational factors, largely this is based on qualifications more than it is price. And as you'll see in the qualifications down here, they have to have the robust, not only the number of folks in the accounting firm enough to effectuate and do the work, but they also have to be well qualified to do the work, have those types of certifications, and hopefully with government experience, as certainly Terry Beckert has. And then as you can see, the fees that they will charge to do that is only about 10% of the weight of the evaluation. And the rest of it will be their approach and their experience and the firm's qualifications. And then, you know, the key staff and the other things that I talked about here, the estimated hours, you know, of what it'll take in order to put the audit together. They'll need to have the financial resources available in order to pay those people and to have enough capacity in order to perform the work. And then the contract period. So the contract period can be a number of different things. The law is really unclear about what the contract period will be. We've looked at GFOA, and that's Government Finance Officers Association. And it's the associations that's a good benchmark. Historically, JWB has done, as does GFOA recommend, an initial term of 5 years with an option of 2 one-year options. So in total, a 7-year contract. And obviously, in any given year, you know, the board can vote to come back and go out with another RFP if they ever choose to do so. And then the action for us today is seeking approvals for the Audit Selection Committee and for the financial expert, the timeline, the RFP evaluational factors, and then the contract period that we just discussed. This certainly will go to the board in the next board meeting, which is next week, next Thursday, for further approval. So Any questions on that?
Let me just jump in. This is from the Auditor Selection Committee, so the board does not have to affirm what the Audit Selection Committee does. You guys are sitting right now as the Auditor Selection. Obviously, we're going to inform them what you've done,
Sure.
but this is the one thing that you're not making a recommendation, you're actually taking
Thank you,
action
Colin.
on.
Okay, so the item is to establish the audit selection committee, which would be this committee, appoint Mr. Stivers as the audit expert, and to establish the timeline. Any questions or discussion? Is there a motion? Mr. Bartlett, is there a second?
Second.
Ms. McShay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we're on to discussion, monthly financial and investment report for September 2025. Robbie.
So, thank you, Brian. This is, in my opinion, one of the most important reports that this committee will see, in that it tells you where we started out with our budget, and it also shows you where we finished with our budget. There's narrative here that I think is really descriptive to the balance sheet. And if you're so inclined to look at that, it certainly gives you some perspective on what's in those categories that I'm going to review. And as I cursor down here to get to it, I've highlighted a few areas for you. And as you know, a balance sheet is your assets, liability, and in government accounting, it's your fund balance, equity that's left over. And this is a picture in time. These numbers are unaudited. They will likely change a little bit as we refine and get to the final audit. But as far as total assets, assets are down from about $68 million down to $57 million. And largely part of that is, most of that is the change in our cash and investments. And as you all have heard us talk about several times historically this past year, is the focus on eroding down fund balance, and lapse particularly. And that's money that goes unspent by our agencies and/or JWB, and it doesn't get used for its useful purpose. So as we continue to contract our lapse, that affects our cash position, and that's roughly the $10 million difference that you see there. The other things that are in there are just assets really from operations. Due from other agencies is a one item of about $2 million, and largely that is for the outstandings that we have with our agencies and the expense that are associated with it. The total liabilities are pretty much flat from year to year because we don't borrow debt, and with our enabling legislation, Colleen is what I call it, but the legislation special act that we have here is such that we can't borrow money without other kinds of approvals that we would have to go forward to do that. So just not a whole lot there. The vouchers and accounts payable there, you can see is a big item there. And those are accounts payable that we have salaries and, or excuse me, with our reimbursements from our agencies that we do, as well as the accounts payable that flows through. That's a big part of our spend there. So that's what's left as far as liabilities are concerned. And then we get down to the fund equity piece of this. And what I want to point out is you'll see a minus here. And that's just last year we didn't report it the way that we're going to report it this year. As you've heard me talk about, that with the 3 months that we're required to keep on reserves, 2 of those are actually reserves, and the 3rd month is for the unforeseens or the unknowns that may come up. That's at the board's discretion when we make proposals in order to infill something. A good example of that last year was the hurricanes. So we had some associated costs that we were able to spend out of that fund with. As you can see, we're down almost $7 million from where we were last year. That's to spend down of the lapse. There's just not as much cash available. But we always fund those reserve accounts to 100%. And then lastly, as you get down, you can see the difference in total liabilities and deferred inflows and fund equity. And that's down about $10 million. And again, that relates back to the lesser lapse that we keep on hand. Any questions on that? That's a real quick summary of of our balance sheet.
Questions for Mr. Stivers, comments,
I've got
concerns?
a few other
discussion?
things to cover here.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So this is where the rubber meets the road. This is the year-end budget that we had. We started out with a budget of revenues. As you can see, you've got the amended budget. So we have the final budget. We got revisions that come just like we'll have for the FY26 budget. And then we work off the amended budget. And we projected in the amended budget that we would have roughly $111 million in revenue. We had about $111 million in revenue. A big portion of that is the property taxes. And as you can see, the property taxes was almost, it was down almost a full 100 basis points or 1 percentage point. And the reason for that is the uncollectability of some taxes that Pinellas County, that service that they perform for us and the taxes that they collect. My guess is the hurricane had some impact on that. We will continue to track that as we go forward in 26 to see how that rebounds or if it does rebound. But we're always mindful of that, as that is the primary and arguably the single source of the funding for Juvenile Welfare Board. And then let's get into expenditures. The administration expenditures, those are the expenditures that we operate JWB on, and we spent 95% of what we budgeted to spend. So that's on target for that. We continue to make adjustments to this operation. As I'll show you, we have $111 million, and their expenses are about $121 million. I'll show you that in just a minute. But we're on target for what we spent on the administrative piece. The bulk of their spend goes to the children and family programs. We spent almost 92% of that, so very much on tact. A lot of that unspent money gets attributed to, not all of it, but most of it, certainly in the difficulty in filling positions and paying a competitive salary and those type things. So we're always tracking that. And then total expenditures down here, as you can see, we spent almost 92% of what we'd planned to spend, but $121 million based on revenues of $111 million. So that $10 million is what we budget in order to offset lapse. This is an unbalanced budget. This is a budget that when you look at the actuals for the end of the year, we had a deficit of almost $11 million. And we budgeted for that because we want to continue to spend down the fund balance. We also want to keep a real close eye on the lapse. Where based on my experience and years of experience, this is just a smart way to do that, in my opinion, with government funds to make sure that we're spending today's dollars on today's children. Questions on that? And also in your materials, this is the revenues that we have, and it's just a comparison from this year to last year, what we collected versus this year, what we collected. These are the expenses, same thing last year versus this year. And then this is a snapshot of the JWB, the administrative costs that we operate JWB on, what we spent this year versus last year, and it tracks along relative to the percentage and proration of the revenues that we receive.
Robbie, those administrative costs include the salaries that we talked about recently that were in the individual line items and not in the admin budget before?
These on this chart do not.
Okay.
But when we calculate the ratio, we're certainly including that. And as we get further into the year, we're going to recast how we report that information and include those initiatives, expenses that we need to. There's about 6 of them.
Thank you.
This is a report that we'll talk a little bit more about as I get into the presentation of the next discussion item. And this is a report that contracts that are assigned between $25,000 and $75,000. Each year at this time we do a look back to make sure that we've picked all of those up. There were a couple that we've included. And there were some that just were done since July that are now reflective on the report. And here's a brief description of those, and these are within the CEO's authority to do. And as you can see, there's several of them on here, not just from the latest period, but there was some catch up that we did. And then budget transfers with a description here. These are transfers that we're moving money around in the budget in order to fund initiatives or shortcomings that we may have in a budget. If we're ever underwater on a budget, we have some latitude per policy to move funds around. If we go from one category item to another category item within the budget, then we have to come back here for that approval. So any questions on that? This is a real key report, I think, from a transparency standpoint, so the board understands the types of contracts that are being signed that aren't coming to the board for approval.
Robbie, has this report been provided historically to the board? And if so, where would I have found it? Because I don't remember seeing it, but I also didn't know to look for it. So
Yes, sir. It's in the financial and investment report, the report that we're looking at here. It's been there every month going forward. Is that the best location for it? Probably not. We can find another way to make that a little more transparent, but it's a part of the financial and investment report, and it has been.
okay, I think it would be good, just from my perspective, it would be good to maybe add it as an item to the board packet under the informational items.
Sure.
I usually look at those, and that way it'll be kind of pulled out and easy for us to find. I'm just one person, but does anybody else any thoughts on that? Just be easier to get to, and when
Absolutely.
you're preparing for a board meeting, it's all there together, so.
Okay. And then finally, this is the investment report. This is our truest concentration account. That's our operating account. We try to maintain a balance in there of about $1.5 million, give or take, in order to fund operations of JWB. These are the 3 investment funds that have an interest earnings on it, as you can see, greater than about 4%, which is good. And we try to keep the bulk of our funds over here so they're earning a higher interest rate and create the interest revenue that's reported down here. Last year we budgeted interest revenue of almost $2.6 million. The actuals, because interest rates held up longer than what we thought they would, that was a really good thing, came in at almost $3.8 million. So we were a little bit over there. We've made that adjustment in FY26 to look at more actuals. Frankly, if we can predict that with a great degree of accuracy, then we probably all should find different things that we could afford to do these days. And this just a pie chart and a graphical chart or a bar chart showing what we keep in the concentration account, the operating account, versus what we keep invested, and the same thing here with the pie chart. And this shows what we achieved in a return in FY24, 4.57 versus FY25 down to about 3.95 or so. Any questions on that report? And before I leave, I'd like to recognize Richard Godfrey. Richard may not be here, but Richard has accepted a position at another organization. He's been with us for about a dozen years, and Richard's just a really fine fellow that I've certainly had the pleasure to work with over the last 18 months. So just wanted to recognize him, and he helped prepare this before us. And we have Leslie Porter now that will help certainly with that, and we'll be looking for a replacement for Richard soon. Any more discussion on the finance and investment report?
Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we can move on to item 3B.
Okay. So this is a follow-up on prior conversation at a board meeting to look at the discussion of delegated CEO authority. And this brings that forward. And what I did is I've taken a lot of the comments that I made in the last board meeting and dropped it into a PowerPoint. And I want to recognize, too, that there's no compliance issue here that I have found at all. I think we're doing things exactly the right way, but I think this is robust discussion that the board's asked for, and I'm glad to bring that forward. The purpose of it is provide the background and the CEO delegated authority as it is today, and it's to support the Finance Committee discussion in this discussion today on transparency and oversight. I also think that this discussion aligns well with public sector financial management practices, or I would call them best practices. The background is currently the authority is up to $75,000 annually. And any given year on any given contract, this $75,000 can continue to roll over. Contracts, it can be applied to contracts, budget expenditures, and allocations. There are also instances that this has been applied if even the board approves a contract, the allocation could apply to it. And I don't know if that's the intent of that or not, but I certainly wanted to point that out. And any given contract, an example could be at $75,000 over 5 years, that totals a $375,000 contract. That would never come to the board other than in that report that we just talked about that's currently in the financial and investment report.
That part concerns me.
Yeah, me too. But keep going, there's a bunch that we'll probably be talking about.
All right. Current policy overview, contracts between $25,000 and $75,000 reported on the financial and investment report. One option could be is to limit that the limit was increased from $50,000 to $75,000 post-COVID. It was also a result of an efficiency initiative, I think, that the board took long before I got here. I think it was in 2023, in order to look at expediting processes and trying to expediting some smaller transactions that the board may or may not want to see. And during that time, that was probably the thing to do with that particular environment that we're in. This environment seems to be, to me, a little more conservative than it was maybe back then. There certainly wasn't as much as revenue flowing and stuff. There seems to be kind of a retraction even with the look back now on the ad valorem taxes. So a little bit of context. I mean, this is not certainly out of line, and I think we've been applying it certainly the appropriate way. The importance of the review, I think from my standpoint, certainly from an internal control and a fiduciary oversight responsibility that we have as government stewards of funds, confirms balance between efficiencies and accountability, and finding that right balance, of what the board wants to see in this environment versus what they don't want to see. It also supports transparency, audit readiness, and public confidence. Impact of reducing the authority. It would be more items that the board would review, and more items that would be on your agenda or could be on the agenda for approval. And the board meets, as you all know, almost every month other than August. So at most you would have roughly a 30-day review, a 30-day delay before something could come to this body for review. And be mindful that we also have emergency relief latitude within our policy if something came up, a hurricane or some event like that we could certainly move forward and then come back and ratify what was done in the next board meeting. And there's also that one-on-one communication with the chair that can certainly happen during that process as well. So reducing the authority would also provide, I think, greater oversight and tighter physical controls as well. So considerations. Among others, I guess, that could be on the list is, we'll be deferring to the Finance Committee for this vetting, and then maintain the current level and just don't have any changes at all. It may be very much in line with where this body wants it to be. Or we could apply the $75,000 as is today, and that's the limit, per contract, meaning if this contract is for $75,000, if at any point it exceeds that in a renewal or in a subsequent year, then it comes back to this body for approval. We would report any non-competitive procurements, and these are contracts that are done without going through a competitive process. Policy allows some of that. But I also think from a transparency standpoint, it would be my recommendation that would be made aware and be very transparent when we did that. And then lastly, we could reduce the level, apply it per contract, and also report the non-competitive procurements. The last thing that didn't make the list was, as I mentioned, any and I just need direction on this, contract that the board would approve, these limits would not apply to that. If we wanted to amend an approval that the board had made previously, I think that it comes back to the board and let the board decide what it wants to do. That concludes my presentation, so I'm glad to facilitate any questions.
Mr. Hendrick, you are the chair once again.
Thank you. Appreciate it. My apologies for being late. Thanks, Robbie, for those recommendations and considerations. And Robbie and I had a long discussion about this in preparation for today's meeting. So I'd like to entertain any conversation from board members first about those considerations or recommendations.
Sure. So I'm okay with the $75,000 spending limit per contract, per event, per thing, but it shouldn't be an ongoing $75,000 every year. So if we have a 5-year contract, it shouldn't be 5 years of $75,000 at $330,000. That actually should come back to the board to be vetted at that point, because it's a lot more money, obviously. And I think that looking back when the board made that change after COVID, it might even been during COVID, we made that change because at that point we were in a mode where we really needed for the CEO to have that ability to spend the $75,000 without coming to the board, because we were doing a lot of different things from food and taking care of stuff like that. I don't think the intent then was for that to be a $75,000 open spending for a 5 or 10 year contract at 75 grand per year. So I think that the intent got lost in what the board wanted back then. It's just my opinion anyway. But I'm certainly okay with the 75,000 per occurrence or per contract, but not per multi-year type stuff.
Mr. Chair, yeah, so I think, Robbie, I may have brought this up initially, and I very much appreciate your review and Mr. McCurach's review and our attorney Colleen's review. And they gave me a lot of really good information. A lot of things I forgot or didn't remember happened, or maybe did some things I didn't really know happened. But first off, I think we're fine in compliance and all that. Like, no one's doing anything wrong, right? But I do think we need to tighten it up in the policy and make it a lot more clear, like like Chief Milliken said. I personally don't think it should be more than a one-time expenditure. If it's gonna be an ongoing contract, like a 5-year contract, it should be in the budget. And that budget should be approved by the board. So I'm not saying that every contract has to be approved by the board, but if you sign a $75,000 contract for this year and you want to put it in the budget, put it in the budget and let's approve it as part of the budget, right? So that makes sense, and that's not like we're having to vote then on 100 different contracts. It would all be part of the budget. So I would encourage us to clarify that in the policy. I also think it would be good just for us to see the non-competitive procurements. Like, I don't need to see receipts for pens and pencils, but non-competitive procurements over a certain dollar amount would be helpful. And I mean, I'm personally a little torn on the 75. It's not a lot of money when you think about our overall budget, but at the same time, we're not taking care of utilities, we're not taking care of roads, we're not buying fire trucks or police vehicles. Like, we don't have the same type of expenditures that most governments have that have higher limits on that kind of thing. So I'm a little torn on it. I don't think we had a problem when it was 50. I'd be fine taking it back to 50. If the board wants to keep it at 75, I'm fine with that as well. I trust everybody here. I trust everybody that has been in all these seats for all these years. No one's done anything wrong. It's just, more information is better, I think, so.
Thank you. Other comments from the board?
I was just gonna say, initially seeing the 75, I personally thought that was a little high. So initially I was, more comfortable with moving back to the 50,000. But kind of to what Mr. Unk said, if we tighten up some other things, I'm a little more comfortable with the 75,000. I definitely think we need to have it by contract and not by year. And then also, if a contract has already been approved by the board, that if an additional amount that falls within that 50 or 75, that can't just be done, it needs to be brought to the board if it's already pre-approved. I definitely think that needs to be included.
Yeah, Mr. McCurach, if you don't mind giving your perspective, and then
Sure.
I'll chime in with a few thoughts as well.
Having the opportunity to sit on both sides, I think it's important that all these are brought to the board, regardless of the price or how much we're spending. You got to give the CEO some leeway to be able to respond to quick issues that we have, or some opportunities that come into play that will need to be addressed or moved to be quickly. I think the non-competitive one to me is an interesting conversation, especially today, since there's lots of changes that are going on and opportunities that come up with organizations where we can actually add impact or benefit in a very short period of time. And I'll talk about one of those in my in this upcoming message that I'll provide you. But I think what's clear is they should never be reoccurring. They should always be, the CEO should only be able to look at it from a year-by-year perspective, and that should be able to be brought back up and identified to the board, as I have been doing, just so you're aware, anything that we're spending should be identified to the board for their information, not necessarily for their approval if it's within the realm or whatever, it be 50, 75. But every board member needs to know what the funds are being spent for and why we're spending it. And I think that's the important outcome of what we've seen here. It's unfortunate that, as an example, there was this 75,000 that turned into 375. That should never happen. And so, I believe that the board should take that into consideration and make adjustments to the policy to ensure that it's only 75, if that's the number, or 50, whatever your number is, but it can only be done year by year. And everything needs to be brought up, at least to be made aware to the board what the funds are being spent for.
Agreed. Thank you, Mike. Just a few comments. In my role as superintendent, our budget is about 20 times the size of the Juvenile Welfare Board, and my limit is 50,000. Anything over 50,000 I have to take to the board. And the whole idea of things recurring is not an option. Now, there is an option for things that need to be done quickly. There's an emergency procedure for that, and it can be taken to the board afterwards. And examples of that are prices on something that is going to go up for tariffs. We bought some refrigerators recently because we knew they were going to double in price if we didn't go do it. So fiscally, it made sense that way. The difference, though, I think in this case between 50 and 75 is the frequency with which the board meets. So, the school board meets twice a month because we're constantly doing business. In this case, we meet once a month, sometimes not at all in some months, because you're not moving things all the time. So I think 50 or 75 is fine, but I definitely think that a hard limit is a hard limit. I would direct us to this document, which is in our handout, which is, those contracts below 75, because typically those tell a story of what you're pushing up against, right? And so what are the things that we're spending between that 50 and 75, or what are we pushing up against? Because that kind of tells me the story of, are we manipulating the system to try to get certain pieces in versus was this a legitimate $65,000 expense, or was I just pushing it because I was just doing it this time, and next time I'll do it a different way, and next time I'll use a different vendor, but really do the same thing, and really that's a $300,000 expense on food, but I did it from 4 different vendors under 4 different names. So it's really on us to look at that and question those things. And as I look at these, when I met with Robbie, I asked about the BMR Consulting and the Cambridge Hill Partners because they're both 75,000, and they both run up against that, right? So why were those exactly 75? And I know the reason, and it's around the strategic planning and some of the other things that we're trying to do. So I think we have to ask questions, and if we don't dig deep enough on that, then I think it could be abused. And I think that's why we have a finance committee outside of the board. So all that to say, I'm open for any considerations or recommendations. I heard a couple, so if any members want to follow up on those comments or make a recommendation. Brian.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, or hearing that, I would like to recommend 50, just because it was working before. COVID was extraordinary. We were paying for rent. We were doing a lot of stuff. We were paying for anti-eviction, litigation. There was a lot of stuff that was flying around back then that's not flying around now. I've been on this board, I think, for 14 years. We've never once denied an expenditure, not one time. I don't remember ever the board voting no in a majority to deny any spending whatsoever. So I don't think we have a problem as a board approving expenditures. I don't think 30 days is that long of a time to wait. As Robbie pointed out, if God forbid there is a natural disaster or some tragedy, there is emergency ultra vires authority that we can then come back and ratify at the next board meeting. So I would go ahead and make a recommendation to lower it back to 50,000, make it a one-time expenditure authority. Any additional renewals or extensions would have to go to the board or be part of the budget. And then make sure the non-competitive procurements are included on this report. And I think that was it. Did I miss anything?
You covered it.
Okay, that would be my motion.
So I'm going to summarize that motion was to make the limit 50,000 and a one-time that any additional accruals would have to come back to the board. And also say the non-competitive part of that one more time.
Non-competitive procurements between 25,000 and 70 and 50 would be, well, I guess any non-competitive procurements over, what, 25,000 would be,
It would only be between 25 and 50, because over 50 would come to you.
Okay.
anyways, And
Would-
that's what you removed back in November.
okay.
Yeah.
So we would put those non-competitive procurements between 25 and 50 would be listed on that same report, financial report.
And it would be 50 per contract per year?
Correct.
That's the motion. Do we have a second to that before we have discussion?
Second.
Okay, second, discussion. Colleen, can you tell us what the emergency purchase price is? My concern on that is, just before you get there, is the language on that sometimes can seem, well, was this really an emergency or was it not an emergency? What I don't want to do is slow down the business of JWB and have our CEO feel like, oh, I'm taking this to the board in error. So I want to make sure whatever the process is, our CEO is able to effectively do his job or her job regularly and not have that process feel like it's punitive or that someone did something wrong.
Right, so at page 13, section 5-6, it's under the emergency response section, and that does, it says the JWB CEO has delegated authority to approve contracts for emergency funding from the contingency budget to meet urgent needs. The CEO will report the use of contingency budget to the board and seek ratification during an emergency. And so that's the emergency language. It really surrounds natural disasters.
Okay. Yeah, my question is, Colleen, would that include if we felt the price was better by purchasing something now versus later?
I would say no. And Mr. McCarrick and I have had the discussion, and we've read the policies together when some urgent matters have come up, and we've said, you know, as the way these policies are written now, that doesn't constitute a disaster. Although, as we discussed, you know, a 16-year-old's definition of disaster is much different than a legal definition of what a disaster is. So we could also tweak that as part of this policy revision, if you'd like.
Okay. Any discussion on that from the board?
So just from a drafting perspective, I feel like I don't mind how broad it is because it has to come to the board for ratification. And my concern is if we try to tie it to a disaster as declared by the governor, well, you know, what, God forbid, what happens if there's a fire and this building burns down? That's not gonna be a disaster declared by the governor, but it would be an emergency for us. And we would, you know, I'd want the CEO to be able to hire, hire companies to come in and help clean up and do all that. So I'm trying to think as a lawyer, you know, what the consequences are of tightening it and how you would define it. And I think that defining it under some kind of statutory determination of an emergency might be too narrow. Those are my thoughts.
It is pretty narrow the way your policies are written now, and it also only provides that it can come from the contingency budget to meet urgent needs. Now, of course, you could always go into a budget amendment and change that down the road, but we could also provide other definitions of emergency, not just disaster.
Yeah, where I'm trying to get to is I like the 50,000, I like the additional expenses, I don't mind the non-competitive piece. What I don't want to do is tie our CEO's hands. And what I'm hearing is there's no flexibility unless there is a declared emergency of some stake. And there are times when you, for the efficiency sake or for pricing sake, a purchases need to be made before the next board meeting. And I want to give the CEO that flexibility. So that I'm passing, I guess, to the other members of the Finance Committee. Is that a good idea, or are other members set on emergencies only?
No, I'm open to giving him more flexibility for an emergency, you know, just based on the example I just gave, that there may be emergencies for our organization that aren't technically emergencies for the county or the state.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that as well. Emergencies are it's a very open discussion of what an emergency is to everybody, right? So everyone's emergency may be a little bit different. And those emergencies are gonna happen not just maybe in our own organization, maybe, you know, some of the people that we finance as well, like our neighborhood family centers or stuff like that might have that emergency need where we need to do something rapidly to take care of them. Can't wait for the board meeting to come to get the kids' lives back in place in those neighborhood centers. So I'm agreeing we need to broaden it. If we're gonna go with the 50,000, we need to figure out how to broaden that emergency use.
That's a good compromise. So I'd amend my motion, Mr. Chair, to ask legal counsel to draft some language that would ensure flexibility for the CEO in a broad range of emergency situations that would affect the organization or our funded agencies and partners with ratification at the next board meeting.
Okay, do we have a second to that amendment?
Second.
Mr. Knox, just for clarification, do you see price efficiency as a
Sure.
possible reason
Yeah.
in that emergency? Okay,
Yeah,
good.
let's be
All right.
competitive, yeah.
All right. Any other discussion? Okay, so we have a motion to update our policies to $50,000 limit. Additional expenses past that contract would come back to the board. Non-competitive contracts between 25 and 50,000 would be added. And we're going to update our emergency policy to include a broad set of emergencies, including price efficiencies.
Do we need to address the contingency fund, where that money's coming from?
These will come back to you written in red line, and so we can all wordsmith them at the next meeting. But yes, I can take out contingency budget if you would like from that.
I think it would be a good idea personally.
Agreed?
But 50 per contract.
Yeah.
Per year.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries, and that'll come back to the Finance Committee first or to the full board? Colleen?
It will come back first to you guys.
Okay.
And then once you are happy with the language, then we will take it based on your recommendation to the full board.
Okay, until that time, we're still operating under the current set of guidelines. Okay, very good. All right. I believe that takes us to the Chief Executive Officer's report.
By the way, just for point of clarification, I agree 100% with what you just described and you're doing. It makes more sense and it adds more value.
And
to it.
Mr. Chair, or Mr. CEO, if I may, I want to reiterate, I know I heard it a couple times, none of this is in direct conversation about any of your leadership.
No.
This is all looking at
I don't
past
see it,
practice.
I don't see it as that at
So,
all. I think it's just good business
Keep up the good
practice.
work. Thank you.
So while we're talking about keeping up the good work, we're now at that point in time that JWB benefits renewal came into play. We reviewed a number of quotes. And JWB, we've decided to stay with Florida Blue for the provisions of health insurance, and we'll continue the same two plans that we've had will have in calendar year 2026. The best part about it is it will be at the same rate and contribution. JWB will absorb 4% increase for dental coverages, which will be provided by Mutual of Omaha, and that will actually come out to about $1,338 in total for the year for JWB. So the staff will not have any additional cost added to their health insurance. They will have the same capability, same benefits as they've had in the past year at the same price. I think it was, our organization of the groups that we worked with on it, where our broker was extremely valuable and supportive in this process. I did go back to Florida Blue and ask them for a 3% reduction, but they didn't take that very well. But, so we are going to have our insurance, again, stay at the same price, where from what I've been hearing, they've been growing up, and other organizations have paid anywhere from 11 to 22%. So I think it's a great deal for us. Now, going back to what we were just describing and discussing, I am signing a deal, or have signed a deal, with an organization called Parent Protect. Kevin knows about it, knows what's going on. Parent Protect actually provides I believe, a very valuable service in the area of lessons learning and training for parents, specifically focused in on cyberbullying, cyber trafficking, and overall health and awareness for children. If this is currently, we've done our due diligence with it. It's currently being used in the state of Georgia completely, also in Missouri. The Department of Education actually paid for it in the state of Georgia. We were able to negotiate a deal which allows every parent in Pinellas County access to the system. They'll just have to register. And the total cost of that for us for this coming year is $50,000. We have had conversations with Senator Moody. We've had conversations with Gus Bilirakis' team as well, because it impacts across both counties. We've had conversations with Castor as well, and Luna as well about this, what we're doing. We're talking to the sheriff on the 18th. We've also met with Chief Holloway already, who has done his due diligence on it. And due to the upcoming or current programs that are there for sting operations that I believe the police and Bruce and his team are conducting, this would fit very well in support of the community. It also allows JWB to be in the forefront and stepping out to help protect our families and children. So I just wanted to let you know that we're moving forward with that as we speak.
Thank you, Mr. McCurrick. We're to open agenda. Do we have any speakers?
I haven't received a card.
Okay, any comments from board members? Mr. Ongst?
Just to clarify, our next meeting is Thursday, the 20th, not Wednesday, the 19th. I have a calendar hold for some reason on Wednesday, the 19th at 2 o'clock saying JWB meeting set up.
It is Thursday the 20th.
Okay, so I do not need to be here to set up on the 19th. Okay.
Seeing no other comments, we will adjourn the